Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast.
And that checkpoint in particular on day one, there was one path that you had to take, which was in the scree. I tried to mention it in a race briefing many times, and I said, like, you shouldn't be climbing. You should be on scree all the way to the top. If you're not at the right spot. But I still had teams that just went up and the wrong way and ended up like climbing, full on climbing.
Well, for me, the action is the juice. I'm in.
Okay, you people sit tight, hold the fort, and keep the home fires burning. And if we're not back by dawn, call the president.
The sun is setting as the sky turns pink. The mountains are calling, and all I can think of is you, my friend, my partner in crime. What you doing today? What you doing tonight? I will run with you till the river runs dry.
As listeners of the Dark Zone know, we are strong supporters of Ascend Athletics and their goal of empowering women and girls through leadership mountaineering in Afghanistan and Pakistan. This summer, they're expanding their reach to support 150 women in Afghanistan, and they're exploring an ambitious expedition to K2 Base Camp in Pakistan, led by renowned mountaineers Natalie and Vibeke Sefland. Ascend Athletics is truly redefining opportunity for women around the world. Be sure to check out ascendathletics.org to learn more about their mission. Once again, ascendathletics.org, and you can find that link in the show notes. Keep in mind, as I always point out, they pay nothing for this promo. Instead, we love the work that they do, and we're happy to spread it to the world. Welcome to the Dark Zone, Adventure Racing Podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens, episode 99. That's right, folks, 99, closing in on 100. Today we have Nathalie Long of Adventure Immersion Labs. Natalie's a race director, adventure racer, ultrarunner, who just had the inaugural Raid The Rockies out in the Canadian Rockies. And it was a great event. We brought her on to talk about it. It was a stage race, rather interesting format and well received. Thanks for being here. You're going to enjoy Natalie. She has done a lot of things. She slides in her UTMB racing at one point. I catch her on that, and we talk a lot about that and all of her adventure and Fiji and everything that she's done. Natalie is a great race director and a fun person to speak to, and we're glad you're here. So sit back and relax and enjoy this episode of the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. I have Nathalie Long of Adventure Immersion Lab, a race company out of British Columbia. Natalie's a racer herself, and we're going to get stories out of her for her own racing. And I definitely want to hear about her premier event called Raid The Rockies, which just passed. So Natalie, welcome to the Dark Zone. Great to have you here. Tell the listeners a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me on the show. So I'm Nathalie Long. I'm a racer. I started racing adventure racing in 2009 in Australia, where I lived. And I did my first XPD in 2010 in Cairns. And I fell in love with expedition races and long races in general. And I've done so far like about 20 or so expedition races and multiple smaller races all around the world. And I started organizing races about 4 years ago and started my own company, Adventure Immersion Lab, about a year ago, actually now, just over a year ago. And I'm a Canadian. I moved back to Canada about 14 years ago, and I fell in love with the Rockies, and I spent most of my summer in the Rockies, and I've always wanted to put a race there. And last year I finally had the opportunity to get something started there, and that's how Raid The Rockies was born. So a 3.5-day stage race in the Rockies, Canadian Rockies.
So the race format is fascinating to me, right? So you mentioned you've done 20 expedition races, and we're definitely going to talk about those adventures, those experiences, and I want to get your feedback on that, because you don't become a successful race director without having that much time and experience behind you, right? So everything you learned there, you applied in the Raid The Rockies. But I'm really interested in it, and a lot of folks have commented to me about this when they knew I was going to be speaking with you, about the Raid The Rockies in a stage format. You mentioned 3.5 days. When we say expedition racing, we think, 120 hours. We think, you're open for 5 days, 6 days, and teams race all the way through, right? The clock starts here and the clock ends here, and in between is all the racing. But Raid the Rockies had a unique format about being a stage race. Tell the audience about how you structured those days. How did that go?
So I tried to have the first 3 days between 10 and 16 hours of racing per day. And the last day was a shorter day in between like 5 to 7 hours. The aim behind it is I wanted to have a race. Like I've done state races before, and the only thing that I didn't like is that they were too short for my liking. So I wanted a race that still challenges you every day, but that makes you like a better expedition racer. Or even like for people that don't like some people don't like the sleep deprivation. So it's to give like an opportunity for these people like to go back and rest. And for the expedition races, it was to give them an opportunity to like push hard. It's like this first day of racing of an expedition race where we all go like way harder than the rest of the days, right? But it's kind of like practicing that first day over and over for 3.5 days. And if you really look at it, like my slowest races were coming a bit late at 11 p.m. or just after, which like if they race 16 hours a day, that leaves them technically with 8 hours, knowing that they had to repack their gear. So take their gear, repack their gear, get changed, eat a bit. Like some of the races didn't get more than 4 or 5 hours of sleep, which is what you would get in an expedition race.
Right,
so
right.
To me, and the way that I was trying to make Raid the Rockies is that it would be as challenging for the top teams that are racing for the cash prize and are pushing hard on those days, and the people who want to try an expedition race but are not quite sure and want this reassurance of like being checked in like every night and being in the comfort of their things. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
sure.
And
so if I understand correctly, so sometimes with stage racing, you race from one place to another and then you camp there and you start the next day. Did your teams come back to the same central area at the end of each day?
So not at each day. So I had 2 days that were starting and finishing at the HQ and 2 days that were half an hour away from HQ. So they had to drive there and then race, finish there, and then drive back.
Okay. So, but it wasn't like they were going from like place to place to place. They had a central location where their gear was, their cars were. And so it provides a really interesting experience. So to your point, you bring out the high powered fast teams and they go through it as many hours as it takes them. They come back, they rest, they recharge. But for the newer teams that want to try out those strategies, they had 16 hours to go out, do what they had to do on the course. And to your point, it's not like they're off for 8 hours. You got to clean yourself up. You got to eat. You got to get your gear ready. So they got a taste of the need to rest, recharge, and to get ready for the next day. So it was a great way for people to dip their toes into the water of that feel without necessarily committing to sleeping in the woods for 4 nights. It sounds like you found a really nice middle ground.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And it also gave like a taste to people that are not super experienced with like transitioning and stuff like that. They understood that if they were wasting like 2 hours of their time at night to try to repack their bin, like it was 2 hours wasted, but they could have slept.
Right.
Kind of thing. And I think I managed to challenge the top team too, because only one team cleared the course.
I read that. Yep.
And on day 3, they took 14 hours 20. So they were like, even the top team had like to push hard and dig deep.
Yeah, because I read a bunch of the race reports, and definitely the competitors got their full. Like that was a hard course, and so anybody who thinks that it's a stage race and therefore this was not an easy race at all. Let me ask you, what was stage 1 like? Like, how did you introduce them into the days of racing?
So stage 1 was, I think, amazing because we managed to get a via ferrata and a canyoning section. And as a racer, you will know that usually ropes on day 1 don't work because you have bottlenecks over bottlenecks. And we managed to get almost no bottlenecks. And they started with both sections. We split the teams equally for them to one section, like one started the via ferrata, one started the canyoning, and they kind of switched. But like the slowest team that was really behind, like waited 20 minutes max.
Okay.
So which wasn't like too bad overall. And so they had like to experience that wonderful like canyoning section and that Via Ferrata. That was amazing. And then after that, they were going more in the backcountry, and it was a trek with a section like an optional checkpoint. That was, and I want to stress that is that the course by itself wasn't super duper hard for the regular checkpoint, but all the optional checkpoints were a bit more challenging.
Right.
And some of them very challenging. And that checkpoint in particular on day one, there was one path that you had to take, which was in the scree. I tried to mention it in a race briefing many times, and I said, like, you shouldn't be climbing. You should be on scree all the way to the top. If you're not at the right spot. But I still had teams that just went up and the wrong way and ended up like climbing, full on climbing. So that's their road choice, right? Like
which is a great thing for the race director to realize that people ignore your directive and they're out there climbing. It's like, guys, I told you.
I think what happened is that one team, and I think it was Expedition in Canada, that went up the wrong way, and 3 less experienced teams saw them and were like, oh, they're up there, they must be en route, and started following.
Yeah, that typically you see that herd mentality, right? They get in there. The momentum's going in a certain direction, and if they're going that way, that must be the right way. Then you have 4 teams that are off course all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it was challenging for everyone for sure. But all the comments I had from day one were like, everyone was amazed with the Via Ferrata, with the canyoning. It was either like the best part was the Via Ferrata or the canyoning.
And I've been in races where we've had both of those events, and usually they have to be later in the race where the teams are more spread out. Otherwise, there's a bottleneck. And rarely do you get them on the same stage. And sometimes they feel kind of like novelties. Not always. But sometimes it's like race directors sometimes drop them in there, drop them in. But it sounds like for your race that they were legitimate parts of the race that teams could move through quickly and provided speed, provided challenge.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't want to put it like later in the race in the sense that every time that it's late in a race, you have teams that don't get to do it.
Right.
And I really wanted everyone to get to experience that. And I think it was well received to have it there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I was in a race one time where there was a rope section advertised later in the race. It was a 5-day race, and it was like day 3.5. And the way the course unfolded it was such a crazy race. The weather was so bad that by the time only one team made it to the rope section, because by then they had run out of time, and the ropes and the safety personnel had to leave, and then that whole section got canceled. So to your point, by doing it early, that was the way to go. So was the first day, did it unfold the way that you thought it was going to, with the challenge and with the teams? That they were out there longer than you thought? Were they there shorter than you thought? What was your take as the RD on the first day?
So my first team came like pretty much where I expected them. The first team came every day, except for the last day that I canceled a little bit of the course. They always came like at what I was expecting in the first team. The last team came a bit longer. But usually that was because they went for an optional checkpoint that they shouldn't have gone to.
Right.
Or a poor nav choice just at the furthest point of the course, and that cost them a lot of time.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, you watch the trackers and you watch these teams, and you're like, oh, don't go that way, don't go. And then all of a sudden, there they go, and it's like, well, I guess we're waiting a while longer. They're not coming home. We're going to sit around a little while. So the first day was the Via Ferrata, the canyoneering, and then was the trekking. What was day 2 like?
Day 2 was they started on foot. It was a packcraft stage. And that one, I got it really wrong. I really thought that most teams would come within like 2 hours max at the start of the packcraft. And I thought it was a fairly straightforward like hike. But I was wrong. I was really wrong.
It happens.
I got some teams that missed a turn that I didn't think they would miss, and ended up like hiking for I got a team that was out for 8 hours on foot.
Okay.
So that was a long day for me on foot. And then I got a few teams that learned the hard way to not believe a team when they said that a checkpoint's not there.
I read about that there was.
Yeah.
Yes, I one of the race reports talked about how one of the more inexperienced teams was looking for the checkpoint, had come across a team that had said, "Oh, it's not there," and they just took it to face value and they walked away from it. Meanwhile, it was there and it was in the right place.
I saw like 14
that's a
coming
big lesson
down.
to learn as a new team. That's a really big lesson not to get sucked into that.
And it was like 7K, it was probably like 4K away. So we came down the mountain, like a little mountain. And I was at the transition and we said, "Hey, checkpoint is not there. We have a picture." I'm like, "Nope, checkpoint is there. The team just before you got it." And then it's like, "No, I don't think it's there." I'm like, "Yeah, I guarantee you it's there." And I said, "Just describe me where you were." And when he described it, I'm like, "Nope, you were not there." And I looked at the tracker and I said, "I can tell you were about 20 meters away from it."
20 meters, like 60 feet, like right there, like around the corner. You win some, you lose some.
So I convinced 3 teams to go back because that was a compulsory checkpoint. The other team couldn't go back. Like one of the guy had like his feet were destroyed. So they went back and we lost a few hours there. So that was a few hours, but I wasn't expecting the teams to be on foot still.
Right.
But, and then after that, we had a really nice backcraft on this North Saskatchewan River. Little rapids, but not too much, mostly like flowing water, but fast flowing water. And I don't know if you saw pictures, but the water there is beautiful. It's kind of turquoisey, light blue. So they were on the river for about 35K, I think.
Okay.
And then they went on a bike. They had to climb a little bit to get to an old rail trail that they took back to town. And then after that, they were only on single tracks or mostly on single tracks. We sent them on a little like bike park, like little...
So
really
that's
nice
a big day
single
too. You had a trek to a pack raft to a mountain bike. How many hours did you have? Was day 2 16 hours? Was that you expecting?
I had the winners came in 10 hours-ish or 9.5 or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And what time did the last team come in?
Maybe. Ooh, I think we were there like until like 11:30, 11:40. So probably like 16.5.
Okay. And also too, this is Canada, pretty north, a lot of daylight. Right, still summertime, still daylight, still pretty good.
We had daylight until 11 p.m.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah.
I know a friend of mine who did Expedition Alaska all those years ago in the height of the summer, and it was like day 3, and she didn't even realize it.
Oh yeah.
Because it was just light all the time, right? And you got a taste of that. So did you find as you planned the race out, and if you knew that each team was going to hit the reset button each day, how did that affect your route planning? Did you make the race harder, more challenging because they'd have the opportunity to reset in between? Yeah,
I had to make it a bit harder than when I was planning an expedition race. Just because, I knew that like those top teams will sleep a little more than usual, so they will be able to push a little bit harder. But at the same time, I think I made it like I should have like scaled it back a tiny bit.
Yeah, you did a little bit of both. Right, you made it. Now, when you look at all the teams you had, like how would you, from your most experienced team to your least experienced team, how big was the gap? Was there a big gap in between the massive gap? So that's when you rely upon the less experienced teams to practice good judgment and not go for that optional TA, but optional checkpoint. But not everybody does that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And I think like we all learn a lesson by doing that too. But there was a lot of optional points, so you could skip like a good chunks like every day. But it's so enticing, right? Like when you're close to an optional checkpoint, and you're like, oh, I think I can have it within an hour, and then you don't realize that hour will be like the make or break.
Yeah. Well, you need 2, because if it's an hour to get to it, you need an hour to get back. Right. Yeah. And then there's the fog of racing where you think you're further along. I was in a race one time with one of my teammates, and literally it was like we were up against the clock, and I'm like, we got to go back. And he was like, well, we have time. I go, we don't. And we ended up like sprinting down the finish, like making it by like a minute because, it's a penalty if you miss that. Right. Judging that time is a hard thing.
We had a few teams. It was on day 3. I think that we had the biggest sprint ever. Team Ozark, and I can't remember like There was two teams that came
Yeah,
at
it
the
was
same
Danny,
time.
Jason, and Summer, right? They had a great experience.
Yeah, them and another team that like literally sprinted, and it was on Danny's birthday too. We literally made it on the
Happy
line at
birthday.
11 p.m. and we all collapsed on the ground.
Right,
It was
to sprint
pretty
in.
epic. Yeah.
So what was day 3 like? So I mean, day 1, Via Ferrata, canyoning, trekking. Day 2, pack rafting, trekking, mountain bike. What was day 3?
So day three was one of my favorite because it was a massive trek and a pack raft. The trek for a few teams was 44, 45K, around that.
Mm-hmm.
And for the others, it was around 25, 26K. Only 3 teams decided to go to the optionals. And 3 teams decided to go for one optional, and only 1 made it to the second optional, which was a bit of a climb. Like I think it was an extra 500 meters of climbing or so. And bushwhacking and in the scree as well.
So how did the team? I'm really curious about the teams being able to reset themselves each day, because when you're and you know this better than I do because you've done so many expedition races. When you're out there for 5 days, when day 3 comes, you're kind of in race mode. You're a machine. Did some teams find it challenging to step off the course, really have a big break, and then get back out there? Like, did they have a tough time restarting the next morning?
Yeah, everyone had a tough time restarting. The last day of the race, we got to that location that was half an hour from where everyone was staying. And at 6 a.m., everyone could have their maps. And it was 10 to 6 a.m., 10 to 6. And we're standing there. We have everything, the arch, everything is blown up. And there's one racer that's on the parking lot. And the only reason why the racers are on the parking lot is because we slept there in their van. And so I'm at my table being like, okay, so what's going to happen now? And eventually all came. And then it was like 10 minutes before the start or something. And I'm with the microphone and I'm trying to ask them to come to the start line. And nobody wants to move.
Like, hey, relax, Natalie, relax. It's day 4.
Relax.
Like,
no, we're not moving. And I was like, come on, please, guys. Like, I'm going to cry if nobody's coming to the start line.
I got to go. I got to get this thing over with. We got to go, guys.
And so they came to the start line, and then most of them went at 7. And then 2 teams just relaxed and stayed in the parking lot for another 45 minutes.
Just hung out, had their coffee.
Yeah.
Real eye of the tiger.
Yeah, it was funny. It was
that's really
funny.
hard, though, because when you're doing it, because here's the thing, right? Like when you're doing an expedition race, there's a point where the race starts where you race away from the start of the race, and then you race back towards the finish. And leaving a TA means that you're closer to home. Psychologically, you're like, wait a minute, I'm already home and I'm leaving to come back here and it's day 4. I can see how people would kind of be like, wait a minute. Like, I want my coffee, like, relax. Okay, so what was day 4 like?
So hang on, I just want to go back to day 3 because it was the most magical trek. So they had to climb to this landslide lake, and there was a pass there that they had to go up and over. And when I set the course a few days before, 4 days before, so up to the race, leading up to the race, I got snowed on every day. Like the weather was not cooperating. And then as soon as the race started, it was beautiful weather and hot. But when I set the course, I wasn't even sure if I could send them over that pass because there was snow, probably avalanche danger. And
right,
I
was getting real all of a sudden, right?
Oh yeah. And I was out there being not confident on my own, with my friend, but not confident at all that I could send people there because I didn't feel super safe. So I had to hire a mountain guide that went to the course, to the pass the day before I sent them there to assess the snow condition, make a track, and tell me if yes or no I can send people there. And the snow had melted so much in 4 days. I couldn't see. There was snow everywhere on top when I was there. And the pictures and the videos shows the pass with big dirt patches and stuff. So I felt way more confident then. And with that track, and I sent my medic up there to make sure that people were going to follow that track. Mm-hmm. But it was majestic. It's you're climbing from that super beautiful lake 600 meters up within like a couple K max.
Right.
And you get to that pass, and then you have an 1100 meter descent to do in 4K to the start of the paddling. But like,
that sounds beautiful. Big mountains, big mountains, big travel.
And there are like glaciers that are pretty close by, so people could hear avalanches there that are happening like all summer kind of thing. And it's just wonderful. Like some people saw bears, some people like saw mammoths, bighorn sheep. It was really good. So that was day 3.
Okay. And so you have to wonder, like, you know, after having such a big event, now you're 3 days into it, people, it sounds like in day 4, the fact that you kind of had to chase them to get started, they had their full of the course. And then, but day 4 was it a full day? Or was it a partial day?
It was a partial day, but
okay.
I missed that. Like the second part of day 3 was a pack raft section.
Okay. They had to get back. Obviously, they were over the top and they had to get back on the river.
Yeah. And that was a river again. So fast moving water. But the difference between when I did it and when they did it was a 10-meter difference in water.
Wow. It's a lot of water. Okay.
Yeah. So mine was pretty flat when I did it. Theirs was going down.
Right.
So they went down, and the lake, which is usually a massive lake, was now a river with a lot of dry spot. So they ended up having to walk a bit with the pack raft and then channel across deep like sections and stuff, which was, I think, pretty cool for the adventure. But so that explains why everyone was, as we say, bagged on day 4.
Right. Because you're thinking to yourself, you did a big high mountain pass, you come down to a river. They're probably assuming like it's going to be a breeze for us, but meanwhile, there's a lot more work to get back on that day 3.
But it was still like a pretty fast paddle because the times were between 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
For 33K.
Okay, that's good speed.
That's still a good speed. But yeah, so day 4 we started on the bike, and we went back on some single tracks, and then along a nitro line, and then back up where we transitioned and went for a last trek. So we had to change that last trek because everyone was a bit slower than anticipated on that bike section. So I made all those points optional instead of having compulsory one on foot, because I didn't want to have to. I didn't want to have to short course like that many people.
Right.
And
well, to your credit, you actually, it sounds like you got ahead of that. Like you saw how the racers were doing. You preemptively adjusted the course, so it took some of the pressure off them.
Yeah. So they learned after the bike, though, that like which point that there was 1 point less. So there's 1 point that we took off the course, and then the rest was optional, but we had to take them in order. So they could take like 4, 5, 9, but they couldn't take 9, 4, 5.
Exactly. You had to go numerically in however you wanted to do it.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that was really for so many people. They were so happy when we finished the bike.
Right. I've been in races where like the last day they cut something. I'm like, oh, you cut that section. Oh no. Yeah. Cut more. Let me get in quicker. Yeah. Oh, that's great. So were you? So first off, what was the podium? How did it finish up?
So Ben Racing.
They won again. Ben Racing. Well, hello, Ben
Racing Canada.
Ben Racing Canada. Okay, very nice.
Ben Racing. Well, they were called Ben Racing, but they are the Canadian team. Came first with all the checkpoints, followed by Ben Racing for our few from the US.
Okay.
And those guys were missing 2 checkpoints total. Third place was Expedition Canada, missing 2 checkpoints as well.
Okay.
And do you want more?
Well, what I'm curious about is how many teams did you have in total? Like, what was the size of the field?
Teams.
24 teams.
I had 24 teams in between. I had 24 teams that took the start between 2 and 4 people.
Okay.
Either 2, 3, or 4.
That's. I mean, to your credit, Natalie, and that speaks to your reputation. First time putting that race on, having 24 teams is a legit turnout for that. For
I was almost sold out. Yeah, I was happy. Yes. I was really happy.
So did it unfold? So was this your first time directing a race with this format?
Yes.
So what was your learning curve like? Like when you look back on it, and this is for the race directors out there.
Yeah.
When you reflect upon the experience, like what did you get like really right, and what did you get like you wish you had done differently?
So I found out that it's harder to it was harder than organizing or race directing an expedition race because you have to set up and pack up every day. So you're setting up before the races, you have to pack up after the last racer. And somehow some of us teams that come 45 minutes after the cutoff time wants to chat.
Right.
So we chat with them and then we pack up. I ended up sleeping 4 hours over 4 days.
Okay.
And I had to drive back and forth. So that was
because you had to
super...
reset. Like you needed the start line every day. You needed the finish line every day. That's really interesting. As opposed to day one, the race starts.
Yeah.
And then day 4, day 5, you finish line. So literally you ran 4, I mean, not to over, you ran 4 single day races back to back to back. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Pretty much. So maybe adjusting the times, I would probably run Raid The Rockies next year. It's in the plan. And I may adjust the times, like it may be like 1 or 2 hours less.
Right.
Less long that this year. But I love it. I love organizing.
Well, you love it, right? I mean, that's why you do
it,
right? Yeah. So it's funny how you, and on top of it too, the first time doing something like that is always a learning curve, right? So you've those adjustments you have to make there. What did you get right? What did you really sort of nail that you felt you did, you were spot on in your decisions?
Well, the course, I'm really happy with my course. I think I managed to show really what I wanted to show to people, and that's what stuck out to them. I always do my courses. I mean, the times that I get, or because I'm doing them, right. I am personally running everything.
Well, that's your reputation, is that you're heavily involved in the race. Like you don't sub out the race planning, like you're the course director, you're the course designer, like that's always been your reputation. And you were able to still do that even though you had these 4 days back to back to back.
Yeah. So I mean, when I designed the course, I did all those legs. Like maybe I didn't do like the entire day. I did like the 47K trek and then I did the paddling another day, but I still had like a pretty good idea of like my times and times estimate. So yeah, that went pretty well. The locations went really well.
Good.
And my team was amazing.
Well, it sounds like you got the whole crew built around you to put it together. You know, when you look back on the experience and you look back on putting a race together of this scale, and obviously to your point, you know, the 4 days in a row and the teams, the back-to-back-to-back nature of it, in terms of the racer communications each day, did they know what the next day's stage was going to be the day before? Did they have a schematic? Like, what did you give them in advance of, or was it like, this is one day and we'll tell you about tomorrow?
No, so I gave them the schematic, I think it was a week or 10 days before the race. I gave them the schematic, and then every morning at 6 a.m. they were getting their road book for the day and the maps for the day. And then, they wouldn't have anything until the next day. So they knew that every morning they needed to come like with their boxes for transition every morning, like ready to hand that out.
So when you sat there and you watched the racers come through, and you had a wide spread of teams, right? You had the Ben Racing's, Expedition Canada's over here, and then you had the newer racers. What did you wish the newer racers knew before they started the race? What would, if you could have gotten into their brains and you said, listen, I would recommend that you do it this way, what would you say to them?
I would say, like, and I kind of said it, but if you're a new racer, don't try to go to the optional checkpoints. Try to enjoy the first day doing all the compulsory, and then later in the race, if you have more energy, go for those optional ones. But I think that's what taxed a lot of people, was to try to go for those little extra here and there.
Well, because probably in the beginning, they're excited, they're well rested, they're trained. So they overexerted themselves on day one. And then when days 2, 3, and 4 came along, they had less gas in the tank to do that.
Yeah. And also I wish I had stressed even more the fact that we were like in big mountains, and don't try to gamble on the route. Like, if you see that it's sketchy, don't try it. Like, turn around and go find the right way.
Well, yeah. And to your point, like, and you said that early when we started talking, that some teams, you had talked about the scree field, But some teams simply were like, oh, well, we know she said Screefield, but everyone is going that way. So that must be the way to go. And they found themselves in some pretty tough spots.
Yeah. So some people, we had one team that was done climbing the entire mountain, and we were like messaging them on the tracker saying, turn around.
Right.
Like, we want you to turn around. This is not safe. We don't want you to continue that way. But they just kept on going. And we saw like the tracker moving 10 meters per 10 minutes for hours.
And then you wait, you get an extra cup of coffee and you wait around for them to get back here.
Yeah.
So you talk about Raid the Rockies coming on for next year. Clearly you were satisfied with the experience. Even sitting here now, other than like the those hour adjustments, any other changes that you would consider going into, if other race directors were considering a stage racing format, what would you advise them when they consider it?
To have a strong team and a big team behind them. I was really lucky that we got fantastic volunteers that stepped in to help us out. But we are a small team. Like, we had a big media team out there that was helping a lot. Like, they picked up like some checkpoints for me at the end of the day and stuff like that. But yeah, just having a solid team behind you.
Yeah. And to that point, for the volunteers that listen to the Dark Zone, we all know that the volunteers are the heart and soul of the sport, right? People, they come out and they spend time in the mountains, and they'll spend days there, and they'll put checkpoints out there, and they'll help feed racers and all of that. And so it's the volunteers, and I've both been a volunteer and I've been able to work with volunteers. And so to those of you out there, we're grateful for that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Clearly all of this, your ability to put a race of this caliber on with the volunteers, with the course, with the form, it's really the culmination of a lot of your own racing. And tell us a bit about yourselves. You know, I don't want to spend too much time talking about Raid the Rockies, which is a fantastic race and deserves all that attention. But Nathalie Long, as a racer, has a pretty big experience base there. You've mentioned you've done 20 races over time. You mentioned you've raced in a lot of different ones. When you look back on your experience with the expedition racing you've done, what races kind of jump out at you as races that you just have such fond memories of? What are some stories that you have from that?
Well, I've got a few. My first race will jump out because I had no experience. I didn't know what I was getting into, and that was a 10-day race. That was XPD Cairns, and pretty much everything tried to kill us on that course, whether it was like plants or animals. Like, my first time, like, slapping a crocodile with my paddle, things like that, you know. But some of the races that sticks out for me, like Raid in France, was one that I had a lot of fun racing, and I lived in France in the past for 15 years, so it was pretty special for me.
They just had a great race going on now. What a beautiful. I mean, that race just sells itself. I mean, much like Raid the Rockies, beautiful area, don't get me wrong, but like Raid in France is just what a gorgeous course.
It was pretty amazing. And then some of my favorite races were XPDs. XPD, I did the one that was the World Championships. That was Ultrarunner. I'm saying it wrong every time, but that was 2016, I believe, something like that. Like south of Sydney. Tasmania was pretty spectacular too. Gold Rush was one of my first races too, that I raced with Team Soul. And that one we went through like the forest fire. That was pretty epic.
So when you think about your clearly once you did your first 10-day race, you were hooked. You really enjoyed it. What is it about the experience that keeps you coming back?
So I don't think I enjoyed it the first time.
Okay.
That
makes my question even more important. So if you didn't enjoy it, why did you come back?
I think it kicked my ass so badly that it made me want to finish, because technically that was my first and only expedition race, but I didn't clear the course. We got short course, and we got short course like 2 stages before the end. But it was at the time where there wasn't like this short course and we make you finish. Like, it was short course and we take you back to the hotel.
Yeah. And that's been, so what's your let's pause there. I'm curious about your take on that, because there's been an evolution in the sport over the years that the racer experience, and racers, the cost of getting there, the time cost, the training cost, like, it's hard. Race directors want to give the racer a full experience, so they'll short course them into a different direction. But back in those days, if you missed out, it was like, wait here, we'll get you a car to bring back.
Yeah,
What's your take on that evolution in the sport? What do you feel about that personally?
Is that I made sure that everyone could pass the finish line, because there is nothing like the feeling of racing for 8.5 days and not passing that finish line.
Right. And then it's just, here's the cab back to the
It's
hotel.
a crush. Yeah.
And you got to go. And how'd your race go? It went.
Yeah,
Did you finish?
exactly.
I didn't finish. And your
No.
family's like, wait a minute, you were gone for 2 weeks. You did this race and you didn't. And so to your point, you want to build that experience in for the race. And that's, and by the way, we're in agreement here. It's a good evolution in the sport. That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so I got my ass so handed to me that I really wanted to like redeem myself.
Right.
And I mean, I enjoyed like most of it. I just didn't enjoy getting lost for so many hours. We were like a brand new like team. So I think we spent like 42 hours on a 19-hour trek.
Right.
So,
Was this pre-GPS?
No, they had a tracker, because I remember my mom being in France, like freaking out and trying to contact Craig to know what was happening to her daughter.
Like, why are they still out there? I mean, while they're
and while they're going in
the race
circles.
headquarters, then it's watching your GPS go in circles.
Yeah, pretty much. So that was it. And then the second one is what really hooked me. Like,
And which race was the second one?
So I believe that was in Tasmania, New England. It must have been Untamed New England.
Untamed New England. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just spoke to Grant Killian. He's coming up on an upcoming episode. How did you like Untamed New England?
I did a couple. The last one was the one that everyone shredded the packs. I don't know if you remember that.
I heard about that one. Yep.
But we had like to open up the trees to like go through, and then open up the trees, go through. Yeah.
It ate everybody's gear. Everybody's gear got eaten. Yes.
Yeah. And then you could find like new gear because people were like losing stuff.
Right.
And,
it was like a flea market. Everything laying on the course.
Yeah. No, I really enjoyed these races. But I love mountains. I like trying out like races everywhere. Like I really enjoy like Ecuador. Costa Rica.
Yeah. Like
it was different challenges, but I really enjoy like Spain, racing in Spain too.
Yeah, I think you're right I think for people with your capacity and your ability to travel, it's an incredible way to see parts of the world you'd never see otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Like I raced in Ecuador, and I remember when I was down there, we were passing through these towns, and I was like, I would never be here if not for adventure racing.
Oh yeah,
completely. And if it wasn't, and even on top of that too, like it's. I would never get there. I would never think to go there on my own. That it's the race director's responsibility. Like whoever he or she is, they're also bringing me through these beautiful areas to show the areas off to me. It sounds like you did that with the Rockies. Like you really wanted to showcase that part of the world.
Yeah. I wanted to share where I'm spending my summer, where I'm training, and every single day that I did my reconnaissance in the Rockies, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And when you're like, wow, like 17 times a day, you're like, okay, I need to put this in my race.
Yeah, I heard that of race directors, and I've had the chance to be involved closely with several races and chance to see it up close. I always get a kick out of the fact that race directors, they without fail, they really do it because they live in the area, they see the mountains, they see the trails, and they can't help in their head but to make the course in their head, which then just becomes real when they put the race on. Like, as opposed to like, rarely is there a person who puts a race on in an area that they know nothing of, right? It's their backyard becomes the race course.
Well, that was me. Like, I didn't know. I had 10 days to scout the entire thing. So I didn't know the area at all, but I talked to the people. I jumped in an helicopter to go and have a look, and talk to the heli guide, like saying, okay, do you think I can go over here? Like, have you seen have you ever seen people going over that pass? Or so having those like betas, and then I'm thankful that I've got really great friends and fit friends.
Right. Well, that's what it boils down to, right? You have people that come along and they build it with
70K,
you.
Yeah.
Right. And they'll test
70K over 2 days.
And you said this earlier, but I want to revisit it. How much of the course percentage-wise did you actually cover on your own? 90%, 95%?
I did everything.
Everything.
I did everything at least once, twice or sometimes a bit more.
Yeah, you could always tell. You know, we all know that there's courses are built in a variety of ways, right? And you can always get the sense that when the race director covers the entire course, you can tell when they've really done it. As opposed, sometimes because of logistics and challenges, race directors assume something's going to be there. They put a course together on that, but it sounds like you really traveled through the course.
So there is one checkpoint on day one, A11, where I was on top of that scree climb.
Right.
But I went in last summer. So I saw that on top there was a little green box with a little a pen and a little notebook. And I was like, okay, if I won't put a checkpoint there, I will put like a clue. What is the color of the box or something?
Right.
And then when we placed the checkpoints, I said to Joel, okay, we need to go and make sure that it's still there. And we started climbing, and a snowstorm just took us over, and we just couldn't climb. So I was like, okay, like I have no choice. Like if there's less snow or no snow, I can send them up. And I hope that green box is still there.
Right,
and we
right.
all came back saying pink. And I was like, shit. They changed the box on me.
Thank God there was a box, though.
August. Yeah. But they changed the box on me like between August and the time of this race. So
There was actually no one went there. They actually made a deal. Okay, I wouldn't say pink.
But I also saw the tracker like going over my.
You can watch them going there. You can tell.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is that it's hard nowadays with the quality of the tracker technology. It's hard not to know where a team says, we know you weren't there. We could tell. We could tell. When you with all the racing that you've done, being on very, very high functioning teams, what is it that your favorite teams did well? Like, what advice would you give to people? Because AR ultimately is a team sport, right? And you're only as good as a team can move. What is your advice to aspiring teams that they should really do well during races in order to function effectively?
Well, work together. So like the teamwork, knowing like your teammates or communicating, like communication is key. And also like trusting your navigator and the navigator trusting your team, like sharing information, like we're looking for this. It's better to have 8 eyes looking than only 2 or 2 tired ones. But yeah, mostly communication, I would say.
Yeah, it's funny how you can see when teams kind of fall apart in a race and things come apart at the seams, the first thing that goes is they stop talking to each other.
Yeah.
They'll get separated a little bit, or they're no longer like, there's that sense of just a lack of communication, and then it kind of falls apart. And once that happens, then all of a sudden they stop being a unit of 3 or 4 or 2. They become 4 separate people, 3 traveling on this course together. And it
crumbles. Yeah.
And then they're in the TA and they're not talking to each other.
Yeah.
And you can see it a mile away when you see that. What is your personal strength? What's the one thing that you think that you do really well as an adventure racer?
I'm a whip. I move through my transitions pretty fast. And I think that's one of my strengths, and I don't need much sleep.
Got it. So the ability to move quickly, because transitions are where teams just bleed time, right? They just sit there and and the clock just keeps ticking and they get stuck there. And the sleep thing really helps too. I mean, there are some people that are just kind of superhuman. They're like, yeah, we're good. 2-3 hours a night, we're good to go. And some folks need more sleep than that.
Yeah.
When you're racing, how do you take care of yourself? What do you do for your feet? What do you do for your stomach? Are you a real food? You change socks a lot? Like, what do you do to keep yourself moving? So
I'm changing my socks more and more. I've never had really massive issues with my feet before, like maybe a little blister. And in Ecuador, all those countries where you have like Fiji and stuff, like when you get like really wet, I will get that, how do you call it? Like when you have the cracks and stuff.
Yeah, macerated.
No, yeah, but like there's that fungus.
Oh yeah.
I can't.
I've mentally blocked it out of my head. I don't want to talk about it. Yeah, but exactly. Yeah, your feet kind of fall apart on you.
Yeah, and when it looks like, it feels like you're like walking on glass kind of thing.
Right.
So I learned to take care of my feet for that. I put some gurney goo and stuff like that sometimes, but rarely. I would change my socks though. I think
Yeah, putting on a dry pair of socks is really something else. It's also emotionally, it's a refresher too.
Yeah.
And then you try to don't get them wet, right? You put dry socks on and you try to avoid every single puddle as much as you can. And of course, you turn the corner and there's a river. Like that always happens, right? The minute you put on dry socks.
Within 5 minutes, yeah. And then food-wise, food-wise, I like to have my oatmeal every morning. Like I have like just oatmeal in a Ziploc and I just pour water in it and I just eat it once it's ready.
That's your breakfast.
That's my breakfast, yeah. And then I've got a little protein powder that I really like. That settles my stomach actually. That has like electrolytes and stuff. So I like to have that once or twice a day.
Okay. Yeah.
But otherwise, we eat dehydrated food sometime or 2-bite brownies.
Yeah. The trick is that I always find early in the race that I need real food to start, and then I want just bad food at the end. I just want sugars and cookies and sweets just to burn through all that sort of stuff.
I do Parmesan cheese too whenever I can find it, like the blocks of that, and kind of like beef sticks.
Yeah, I've heard that kind of calorie dense. What is your training like? What do you do like when you're not racing? Do you work with a coach? Do you train every day? Do you like how do you stay fit?
So I've been working with a coach. I just haven't for the last year because with all the changes that happened, I needed a bit of time, but I just started back with her again. And so I do have a coach. She's a really great athlete. She's on the Canadian team of ski mountaineering.
Okay.
She did the BC bike race a couple years in a row and won it right away. Well, she was not really a biker. Gotcha. And she's the kind of girl that, like, she's so strong. Like, when I was training for UTMB for 100-mile race in Europe, she would come with me for like a 50K, 2,500 meters of ascent with no training.
Let's pause real quickly for a second. I like how you just sort of dropped into the conversation when I was training for UTMB.
Well, it's how I met her. That's how I started training with her.
So how was UTMB? So you raced UTMB?
I did it 3 times.
3 times. Say more about that for our listeners. I like how you mentioned that out like, yeah, when I did UTMB, 3 times. Come on now, cough it up, Natalie. How'd that go for you?
Well, it was good. Like the first year was horrible. I finished it because I'm really strong-headed, but it was horrible. I wasn't training properly. I wasn't training with Kylie at the time. And I just thought that running up and down the little local mountain here was enough. And then I realized halfway through the course, going down to Courmayeur, I was crying after 14K of descent and pretty steep. My quads were burning. The second time I did it, I was training in the Rockies. And I was doing a bit more 50Ks here and there. And it went well. I shaved like 3-4 hours of my time, 3.5 hours of my time. And then the last time I did it with one of my best friends who wanted to do it. And I felt really good. We shaved another hour of my time. He was pretty sick the entire race, but he still like stick it through. And I was training like regularly with Kylie. And that was the best. Like she was at the time, I was like, oh my God, she's asking me to do 50K every weekend, like in the Rockies with I don't know how many meters of elevation. But then when I got on course and I was going down to Courmayeur, I was like, oh yeah, I'm feeling.
Oh, that's why I was doing that.
Yeah,
I feel really good now. It's funny how we'll go back to UTMB in a second, not letting that go. But it is, I can relate to 2 things. I can relate to the benefit of having a coach and the benefit of not having a coach when things get too busy, right? Yeah. That when things are going on and when things are happening in your respective life and you're managing a lot, sometimes having a coach becomes a burden because it's another thing you have to check. And so sometimes psychologically, you just have to say, listen, I need a break. Like, this is great. I'll be back eventually. And I've been there myself. Like I've been the idea, like having a coach and, because nothing is better than outsourcing your brain to somebody else. Like they know better than me, but sometimes where it's kind of like, listen, I need one less thing to worry about. And I have to step away from that. And I say that for the sake of the listener who might be kicking around getting a coach. It has to be where both parties are ready for it. It's tough sometimes with a coach if you're getting clobbered with life just to have another thing on your plate to do that. I totally get the idea of you taking the year and all that's going on and just catching your breath and now getting back into the coach.
And I'm coaching myself, so I can write myself a training plan, but the accountability is not there.
No.
That's why I like training with someone else.
Yeah, and it's good it's very good from a relationship perspective to be accountable to somebody else. Mm-hmm. Like they send you the plan and you do training. Like I don't know about you, but like we use Training Peaks and you upload and the coach can see Like this thing in our wrist doesn't lie, right? Either you have the data or you don't. And so you snuck in UTMB. It also wasn't lost on me that you mentioned Fiji before. Did you do Eco Challenge Fiji?
Yeah, I did it. I did it with the UK team.
Okay, how'd that go?
UK Adventure. When it was different than any other.
Now, when we say Fiji, races. Was it the most recent one that we just had?
Yes.
Or was the one so you didn't do it all those years ago, back when it was?
No.
You've done it the one. So you did the Amazon version of Eco Challenge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was a bit different than expedition races as I knew it. A lot more sleep.
Right.
And just a few different things. Like there's a lot that I loved. I learned how to do the OC, the outrigger. Paddle the outrigger. I didn't know that I would be able to paddle like 30, 40K on a sub before.
Right.
So I learned new skills, but like having a horse, not a fan, especially when it's not equitable in between teams. That some people had money, some people didn't. So that I wasn't too much of a fan of it. But climbing, we will never be able to put some of those climbing sections in our races. This is just crazy. I've
heard that when they and kudos to Kevin Hodder and his whole team for putting that race together. The folks I've known, that we've had multiple people on the show who've been to Eco Challenge Fiji, and they talk about how the scale of the race, it was just so big, and you would need that Amazon money behind you, that no race director has those resources to put that together on their own.
No, exactly. Yeah. Or to send people across on the ocean, to an island, at night.
Yeah, the coverage and the safety and all of that.
Safety, exactly. Yeah, it's huge. That was huge. So that was interesting. It wasn't the hardest. I know it's the world's toughest race, but I didn't find it being the toughest race ever.
Yeah, well, I've heard that. People have talked about that. The fact that it was Fiji's always hard, right? Don't get me wrong.
It was hard.
But when you consider it for what people thought it was going to be versus what it was two separate things. It wasn't as a punch in the mouth as you thought.
Yeah, exactly. But it was beautiful, and the Fiji, the people in Fiji are the best people ever.
Yeah. I've never heard a person talk about that race that spoke negatively of really any parts of it. It was a great race, great experience, and all the excitement around it. It's a shame too, because when that race ended and they talked about doing Patagonia right away,
I know.
There was if you go to the website, it's still there. It's still up, and everyone was going to apply for it and all the stories, and then Amazon just made a business decision and said we're not going to do another round of it. Yeah,
that's a pity. That's really a pity, but
and would have been amazing. So you've checked off UTMB, Fiji, all these other races. What other big events have you tackled that you want to talk a bit about, or have I pretty much got everything out of you that's worth sharing? What's other big stuff you've done? I
think so. I did Ecuador, the World Champs in Costa Rica, Ecuador, Tasmania. I think I did 5 or 6. Wyoming. Wyoming was a good race too. I really like that one.
Yeah, I've heard that. People have spoken about that race with a certain level of enjoyment, that Wyoming, that was a really, really strong, a great experience for people. And I think the way I've heard about it was that they were surprised at how much they liked it.
Yeah.
Right?
We did it 3 times, I think, 2 or 3 times. So it was enjoyable. I really like that one.
So obviously, I definitely we're going to get to your next event coming up. I know, and you have another one coming up, a couple 4 and 8 hour races right around the corner. I want to talk about those. But when you look at your personal horizon, right, you've checked off all these boxes: successful race director, UTMB, all these big races.
I did Oregon. Oregon was a really good one. Yeah.
The most recent Oregon one?
Yeah. Yes. The one in the snow? Yeah.
Yes, the one in the snow. Yep. Up and over the top of the mountain in the crazy pack raft. Great race.
That was good. Yeah.
Right? Now, are you going back? Now, when is your next race?
Oregon.
You going back this year?
Yeah.
And who are you racing with?
Not 100% sure yet.
Okay.
I've got a potential team, and if it doesn't work out, I will know by the end of the week, and I may race with another team that's looking for someone. Yeah,
they do. Ben just puts on a great race. There's that's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And so, what's your take on, as a veteran of the sport, the Expedition Oregons, and Rootstock Racing has Endless Mountains. I know that's where you and I first met in person. That we what's your historical take on the growth of the sport in the Northeast, in North America? What's your take? Are you surprised by it? Do you think it's going to grow some more? What do you think?
So there's something that really surprised me is that it doesn't take up as much in Canada as it is in the US. And I just don't understand why.
Right.
Especially like on the East Coast, it seems like it's pretty good. But on the West, like, and we have like some of the best terrain. I just don't get why people, and we have lots of mountain bikers who also do like ultra running and really strong ultra runners. So they do all those things. They just don't have like the appeal for, or they don't know how
it's
fun it
interesting,
is.
right? You would think that the American West and the Canadian West, you would think would have this massively huge adventure racing scene.
Yeah.
And it's kind of not there. With all due respect to Rocky Mountain Series, I don't want to, please, race directors, don't get mad at me for saying that. You would just think in relation to the East Coast of America, which is so much more congested, so much many more people, you have like the Rootstock Racings and the Strong Machines, and you have the Nairas, you have all those, you go right down the coastline, you have all those events that are going on. You have Tansy and you have Delmarva and all of that. And then it gets kind of like west, it gets kind of quiet.
I know. And that's why I'm working really hard, like to build that community in New Okanagan where I live. Because like, every time that I introduce someone, like 95% of the time that I introduce someone to adventure racing, they love it and they come back.
Yeah, I agree.
So
the
it's a
sport
matter
holds
of
on to a
getting
lot
more
of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Now,
But
I know
also,
that you have... Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. But also I was going to say, like, I think we're getting to a point where there's so many events that it's going to get too congested. And I'm not talking about just adventure racing, but like, because adventure racers like me, I do ultra running as well,
Right.
or bike racing or whatever. And it seems like there's an event, like just in town here, there's an event every weekend or 2 or 3.
Yeah. I read a really good Run Sign Up is a company, you might use them. Run Sign Up does all the registration, and they're a great company to listen to and to follow. They publish a lot of their data, they publish a lot of their information, and it's every week you get something from them, and they just put out like their quarterly results to the year so far, and they have like 8% growth. That people are just, that it's just everywhere. There's more races, and not just adventure racing. There's more events. There's more people racing. There's more, and it's really interesting how there's this, that more and more people are getting involved in it. And obviously, there's going to be a bleed over to every single endurance sport. But you're right; it's almost like it's congested. And I wonder, are more people doing it, or are more people signing up for more events so it feels bigger? I'm curious if the base is growing.
Well, for us, and I think we're not the only one in this situation, but for me in BC, in the Okanagan, in summer, it's really hard for me to put an event. I don't even know if my event is going to go in a few weeks, in 6 weeks' time, because of fires. So all our events need to be either in the spring or in the fall. Yeah. And then we have snow. So...
Well, the window gets really small, right? There's a small time window because, and it's, first off, it's crazy that fire danger is a thing, right? Just, it's 2024, right? And so I think it's a super small window. And I have heard too that one of the challenges that race directors have in that neck of the woods is permitting. They have a hard time working with all the various land managers and getting the permits and getting the approvals.
So yeah, it is challenging. And I'm not going to lie, the first couple of years that I had to do it, it was very cumbersome and like hard to do. But I'm getting pretty okay with that.
Yeah. I think that once you make those connections,
the right contact and the right reputation too. They know that I've been organizing races that were really respectful and
I have sympathy for land managers because there's a lot of pressure on them to first off protect the natural resources but also too is every time they say yes to an event, they're also agreeing to take on part of the risk of the event. And adventure racing struggles, and it's hard really to explain the sport in detail to somebody who doesn't really get it, and they just don't. It's a tough sell. But to your point, when you have 1 or 2 or 3 successful races and you talk to people, then they're kind of like, oh, okay, we know you, and here we go. It gets easier over time.
Yeah. The only thing that I found harder in BC is that it's hard to bushwhack. Right. Having permission to bushwhack, you need to be on private land.
Gotcha. They don't want you going through the natural landscape.
No.
Yeah. No. I've heard that in other places too. You just can't beat the course.
It's hard. Like it's hard to make a navigational course or
Because
hard
otherwise,
navigation.
because you're on the trail the entire time, and then it's one long. There's no navigation.
Unless you can find a place that has so many trails that it becomes
right. But even then,
a challenge.
like it's kind of fun to leave. It's kind of I remember speaking about Untamed New England, right? I remember back when I did it back in 2018 that when Grant put out these this huge swath of land. And there was like a checkpoint on top of a hill, and there wasn't a single trail going to it. It was like your job to figure out how to get up there. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's pretty cool to do.
So tell us about your events that are coming up. What's I know am I right? Is it August 17th? I think that's what I saw.
Yeah,
you have a
August
4-hour
17th.
and 8-hour.
Yeah, that's our last race of the season. It's a 4 and 8 hour. So once again, we're trying to attract more new people and families with kids into the 4 hours. And then the 8 hour is just a fun event for anyone, like from experience to less experience.
What are the disciplines? Trekking, biking, boating, the whole shooting match?
Yeah. Like paddling, trekking, mountain biking with map at campus.
Got it. Any scree fields?
No, but we did see, we were scouting that last week, and we saw a mama bear with a little cub, but really cute.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let you see them together. You don't want to see cub by yourself. That's what you don't want to see.
No. But they were really cute. They were small and really cute. So
excellent.
Yeah.
But before we let you go, Natalie, and I appreciate your time. We're up against the schedule here. I know that you have a lot to do. What message do you want to? The dark zone is a big part of our listener base. Are people who are learning about the sport, dipping their toe in the water, and want to get better at it. What is your generalized advice for the newer racer that you think that they really should focus on if they want to grow in the sport?
Orienteering, navigation, and just going into any little race that they can to start with, because there's nothing better than experience, in my opinion. That's how you learn the mistakes that you don't want to do again.
So to your point, just keep getting out there, keep getting after it,
yeah,
race after
and
race.
that's how you're going to meet people too.
Right.
So.
Build the community out there.
Yeah.
Well, Natalie, thanks for being on the Dark Zone. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, folks. Episode 99 of the Dark Zone Adventure Racing Podcast. Thank you to Natalie for coming on to the show and spending so much time with us. A great interview, and we're glad that she could be here. Be sure to check out her website, found in the show notes. Thanks again for being a listener of the Dark Zone. As I always like to say, if you keep racing, we'll keep talking. Head over to your platform of choice and like and click and subscribe. The algorithm likes that. Be safe out there and have fun.